It doesn't always have to be fun, but it always has to be stimulating. This is the Yoakum Strength Podcast with me, your host, Austin Yoakum. And on this episode of the podcast, we have Rett Larson. Rett is the German women's national volleyball strength coach, where he's currently preparing the team for the Olympics. On this episode of the podcast, Rett takes us down his play, work, work approach to warmups, how he implements the differential learning approach to skill acquisition, and his approach to vertical jump training for volleyball players. This podcast is a must listen for any strength coaches looking to bring life to their sessions. I hope you get as much out of it as I did. Thank you for listening. Keep chopping wood. Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Yoakum Strength Insider. The Yoakum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Yoakum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with a Yoakum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program. Boom.
This is the Yoakum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks. I'm excited too. Let's get into it.
We've been ripping for 10 minutes already, and I had to start press record because of we're gonna get into some good rants here, some good rants about some Nerf guns here.
Yeah, I hope it didn't peak too early.
We used up all our good content before we could press record. Right. Yeah, so I've been like I said, I've been looking at your Instagram page and just loving everything that you're doing. And obviously you're working with super high level athletes, so that makes it even cooler. But your approach to like the differential learning approach, the constraint led approach, the play and work, like combining those two things, because that's a big thing. I think, and you talked about how you've met Ido and Ido Portal in person. And one of the things, and now that I'm just thinking about this, one of the things that he said is, and I make sure I get this quote right, but it's like, the playful approach is not like a soft approach. Like that's the shitty playful approach. Like if you do play right, like you get so much work done, and it is violent and it is aggressive and it is super intense. And I watch your stuff and a lot of stuff that we do and a lot of the stuff that we have coaches come on. It's like, you call it play because they're smiling and they're engaged and they're having intent, but the amount of work being done in those sessions is unbelievable and to blow your mind. But you and I talked before we started recording. If you haven't broken out of the box of the barbell and you haven't broken out of like how you see the world, it's really hard for you to see that. You just see smiles and not a barbell. And it's really hard for you to be like, oh, that's actually work being done. So I guess the first thing that I want to ask you about, and we covered a little bit before we press record, is how did you break out of that initial box? Because that is the biggest thing for a lot of athletes, is like, there are a lot of coaches is breaking out of that box of play being work, or just like, I need to lift more weights, or I need to linearly progress, or I just need to squat more. Like, how did you initially break out of that box to take it to where you've taken it?
I think that at least initially, the first crucial part of this for me was like starting to work overseas and getting exposed to coaches that were doing kind of a bunch of facets of strength and conditioning a little bit differently than I had done them in the past. So I had a mindset shift, like you talked about, Ido Portal, like, going to see some of these other coaches that were absolutely happy making their warm-ups and workouts look super messy. Like you can say, the playful, whatever, and it's certainly playful, but it's also can be really, really difficult. It can be mentally tough because it is so difficult. But it was the fact that there were people that were thinking very differently than what I'd been exposed to in the States. And that led me to a kind of a natural progression of, all right, well, what parts of my workout could I adjust? And like, what sacred cows can I slay? How much stretching do I really need to do before a warm up, like to have the athletes be safe? Like, do I have to do these 20, time tested, old school calisthenic, thermogenic jumping jack variations that everyone's been doing? Is that the only way to get athletes warm? Or can I start thinking more freely about this and do a warm up that I'm excited to go and have the girls try tomorrow? And also that when they get it, like they're smiling and sweaty and maybe a little smarter, and maybe I've made them a better athlete. And maybe it looked like maybe my head coach is high-fiving me because it solves a problem he's been pulling his hair out about like for 3 days, or at least inching closer to one. And so like when I started freeing myself from the constraints of what traditional warm-ups, if we're using that example, look like I got a warm-up that the athletes would thank me for after, like, thanks, Rett, that was fun. And head coach would be like, hey, thanks for working on the crossover blocking mechanics. Like, you heard me doing that, like talking about that last night. I was, yeah. I mean, I got bungee cords. Like we can work on that. And like very crucially, the parts of the warm up that get the most attention are, of course, like sometimes the games. I won't even say gamification, but the games that we'll play, or the dancing, or the like whatever it is that just looks super fun. But I almost had to do that part, Austin, because I decided early on I want my warm ups to be hard. I want to push more strength into warm ups. I want my weight training sessions to go from 90 minutes down to 60 minutes because I pushed like a ton of exercises that I used to have to do in strength in the weight room. I pushed them to warm up. And so if I am going to make warm up like a mini strength session or a mini rehab session or whatever we need, I also need to offset that with something that's more fun, that like afterward, the girls are high-fiving me about, because it was so much fun, and they're laughing and they're asking me to film it so they can put it on their TikTok or whatever it is. That's the part they remember. And the part that I cared the most about was I got them to do 3 sets of 30-second handstand holds against the wall, and they got their shoulders strong. Like that's the paying of the dues that make the whole mix work.
Yeah, and when you were starting out, because I also had a very traditional like American CSCS warm up, even like a lot of Joe DeFranco's like Lumber 11, like it was just copy and pasted like the exact warm up.
Austin, we're about to both lose our NSCA memberships right now if we keep on just blasting CSCS. Hey, Jesus Christ.
If I haven't got kicked out yet, I don't know if I can get kicked out. But
all right, sorry, I interrupted you. Go.
No. Keep going. But what were those initial? Because I started off with that original warm up. What were your original like cows that you slayed, and what were those? Because you have coaches like I realize like how deep into it I am, and like how easy for me it is to like break out of those molds and kind of do whatever I want to do. But then I remember back to like my first time just trying it, because I was blessed to be like with Sean Michka and Tyler Yerby, two amazing guys from Emergence that were like exposing me to these ideas. But I was so indoctrinated to the old ideas that like they would tell me something and it would make sense and I would still fight it. I would be like, I don't know. So I'd like slowly implement. So instead of doing like an A skip, I would add like an A skip variation. But what was that transition period like for you? Like from the very old indoctrinated way to like the new way? Like how did you slowly make it, or did you just fully jump in?
No, it was the stuff, like I got rid of the stuff that never, ever felt like it worked or flowed, or I never really bought into it. Like for instance, like foam rolling was the first to go, and maybe, and it works like, or I am fully behind it. Like I think almost my entire team owns a foam roll and uses it at some points, but it definitely wasn't going to take any, like a 15 seconds I'm not taking out of my warm-up time to do that shit. Like if you like it, then do it. But foam rolling was something that immediately went out. And then I started kind of auditing all the stretches that we used to have to do. Like, it's just like, it's because I have a library of 700 stretches in my mind. I feel like I have to use 23 of them every single time I warm up. I was like, well, that's kind of BS. Like, I'm pretty sure there's not a lot of studies that show that the most flexible person on your team is the least likely to get injured or the best athlete. There's not a lot of studies that show that more is better when it comes to stretching. So I was like, okay, why don't I just pick 3 or 4 that move the main, joints that need to be moved for volleyball. Then I just make sure that volleyball, my warm-up puts them in a bunch of volleyball specific shapes. Good. But that frees up more time for me when foam rolling, like unnecessary stretching, go out the window. That, I have to have, oh my God, I've been watching that thing fall.
Yeah,
It has
what
been
this
so
whole thing just
distracting.
collapsed.
I've been waiting for this outtake reel. I was like, all right, we're gonna do this
little
anyway.
Easter egg there for the listeners.
Um, anyway, yeah. So like, once when I started getting rid of that kind of stuff, then I started being able to blow out like the stuff I really wanted to do. Like I can say, okay, I can actually make this a legit strength training session where we get at least 3 sets of exercises in because I've taken out a lot of stuff. And, when thermogenics just need to get their body temperature up, the world opened up to me. So I was like, all right, I don't remember the last time, that's not true. I have done some A skips, like just because it's a neural kind of, it's almost a neurological puzzle for my athletes because they've never done one. Like I love A skips and B skips and some of the ways that I will like trying to do those with your legs while swimming with your upper body. Like all of that is that's all just fits into a bucket now for me, kind of like movement puzzles that I'll challenge my athletes with, stuff that I don't let them do enough that they get really good at it because an A skip is not one of the key performance indicators for elite volleyball. So I just, So I started believing in way more variety in order to have them kind of develop this very expansive movement library. And I just started trying to think of how can I make that library bigger while also making it a extremely stimulating environment. Like it doesn't always have to be fun, but it always has to be stimulating.
Yeah, that's super good. And one of the things, and I like that you mentioned, like you brought up A skips. There's 2 things, like I always make fun of like A skips and 3x10, like sets and rep schemes without like like initially, like I explained what I was talking about there, and now it's just turned into a meme, but it's like, it's not A skips or 3x10 that is wrong. It is the philosophy that goes into every single day you do A skips. Every single day you only do 3x10. You're not approaching it in the movement puzzle, movement philosophy, or there's really no purpose there. Like you're just doing it because you have done it before. And like you said, like at some point your warm-up's just turning into just like getting their heart rate going, when you can do so many more things in that setting if you just spend just a tiny bit of time and effort into, okay, we can build some intensity in here. We can build some intent in here. We can build some purpose to creating these movement problems and solve. Like even like you said, like something as simple as like adding some sort of awkward upper body movement. I know Bobby, why am I blanking on his name? Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes trainer, Bobby Stroop. I know he does a bunch of locomotion stuff where he has like skipiokas and just like slight twists on there, and just how much that does challenge an athlete because they're not used to being able to do that. But building out these movement problems it's so helpful in like so many ways, like trying to get that athlete engaged because they haven't done it before. And athletes that are competitive and like any athlete, like an athlete in quotation, is going to be competitive. They're going to want to figure out that movement problem. So you get them, they suck at the start and then they want to get better at it. So you get them like driving in there.
And this flies in the face of what we've learned about like slow progressions to stuff. Oh, if you want to teach an A skip, you should probably teach a high knee variation. Then you got to probably go on the wall and do some snap downs to teach that foot action. You got to blah, blah, blah. And instead I'm like, no, I'm going to throw the hardest variation at you. And then I'm just going to watch you fail and smile and flail. And no one's getting hurt. Like when I'm putting an aqua bag on your back the first time you try to do a lateral A skip, which is just something I'm making up, but it's something that is neurologically engaging. It is a movement challenging puzzle for them to figure out. And that works. But that's not the way that, a lot of traditional strength coaches, which want their warm up to be like this showcase of really, really nice athleticism. You're right. You like a lot of coaches, me included, when I was a younger coach, like I wanted onlookers to look at my warm up and be like, holy shit, Rett has these girls dialed in. They are in sync. They not only A skip, but they all A skip together. They, it's this symphony of foot strikes. Like that was important to me. And in my old age, like I think that was at the expense of them. Like the messier, the better. Like give Mahomes a crazy variation, but you have to have athletes that are willing to fail and look a little bit stupid. And so it's a cultural thing too, and fortunately for me that now everyone knows if you're going to hire me for your team, like that's going to come with the territory. We're going to like warm up is the spot where we push the messy outer edges of athleticism and fail a bunch.
Yeah, and Stu Bourne mentioned this to me like when I was doing it, and I can't remember how we got on the topic, but It was basically like I was talking about how much better they were getting at something. Maybe it was like an A skip, or it was something dumb. I can't remember what. Maybe might have been even like a landing mechanic thing or like a drop down or snap down. And basically what he pointed out, he's like, the worst athletes are getting better at it, as well as like the good athlete. The good athletes already had it. The worst athletes are getting better at it. Like they're all doing the same thing. It's like there's no that, and that, like that's one of the things that I really enjoy about these movement problems, like challenging and seeing like how quickly, because I think that's one of the best traits of a good athlete is how well and how quickly can they solve new movement problems. And that's a skill you can pick up. Like that is something that I really like. And there's some bro science here because I don't have the studies to back it up, but you can really see the more movement problems you solve, the better you become at solving movement problems. And I've noticed this specifically in myself, of where like I got early on, like I got really strong, really big, really powerful, but I sucked at solving different movement problems. Like if I could get into states where being big, strong, and powerful were good, I was set, because it was the same movement problem over and over again. So give me a barbell, I'm set. But give me a situation in which I have to solve a new movement problem in a different way, or use these traits I had developed to solve a different movement problem. It was horrible. It's like having a hammer for every single thing. It's like a saw would have done much better. And through the process of exposing myself to more movement problems, now it's like I can step in a lot of situations. And that doesn't mean you're the best right away, but how much quicker you pick up skills and how much quicker you are able to solve movement problems, and just the confidence too, which I think is a huge part of it too for a lot of athletes, especially younger athletes. It's just like your body's capable of solving these problems. Your body is capable, and the process of like you have failed before and you've been laughed at before in these sessions, and like it's not the end of the world when you mess up or goof up. And I just like I think back to my old state when we were doing these things and everything was perfection, and it was like training was just almost just more of this ego thing. It's like I like the coach wanted me to be good so they could have their ego inflated, and I never wanted to fail in training so my ego could be inflated. But it's like that's not sport, that's not life. Like I would step onto a sport or life and like obviously get exposed, obviously like fail, and just have never been exposed to that in any setting, because everything I was doing in training was a win. Everything I was doing in training was successful. It was never messy.
Yeah. And you're hitting something that's very topical, because we just finished, today was our last day of training at the Olympic Training Center. Tomorrow we go off to the Olympic qualifying tournament. And just today I broke out my 5 spike ball sets that I have, right? And the athletes were like, Rett, you have 5 spike ball sets. Like, how much money did you spend on this? Why do we do it one time per year for 5 months? I was like, and I tell them, it's because I don't want you getting great at it. Like I like when you guys suck at it. Like it's you guys start getting messy. I like it when it's messy. That's the same reason we don't hula hoop very often. It's the same reason we don't do the hacky sacks very often. It's the same reason we don't throw a frisbee all the time. Like it's because I love knowing that $1 million star player has no ability to track a frisbee in the air when it's tilting, does not have that concept, but she figures it out. Like, and that's an important skill or muscle to flex is the ability, like you said, the ability to pick up a new skill. And yeah, so, I'll only bring out the hula hoops if I'm going to progress on the stuff we did 3 months ago with hula hoops by making it much harder and have them fail again.
Yeah, I love that, because you can definitely see it's like spike ball almost turns into people's A skips, and obviously you still get more movement variability, but it's the same thing. It's like you just get so good at the one thing that like it kind of takes away the purpose of what that one thing was there for in the first place.
That's why the dancing is evergreen, because there is no, like, first of all, my current team is just horrible dancers, which is great, but they and I'm not good at dancing, but but there's no shortage of continually more difficult dances to do with this team. So that's why it's an evergreen thermogenic for us.
Well, and that's something that I've actually been super interested in and like trying to implement, because like we have a lot of male athletes in our gym, and there's so many like pieces, but like dancing for male like athletes, especially American like males, it's like they have no ability to be able to do that. So it's like that can be such a great like thing physically, just exposing them to like the rhythm and like moving their body in that way, but also like psychologically of like just having them exposed to that and like working with somebody, moving somebody in that way, like dancing with somebody. And we do a lot of combat prep stuff where it's like your goal is not to like, so almost like a shadow boxing type thing, but basically where you're working with somebody else. And even in those situations, it's like you can see like they can't dance with somebody else. Like they're everything is about controlling the other person, but you can't work with them. And trying to develop movement problem situations in which they're able to work with somebody else and flow with else's body, I think is there's a lot of low hanging fruit there. But I don't know enough about dance yet, so I've been trying to like get into it, but don't know enough about it to like really implement it with the athletes. Where it's like I'm trying to like find the best way to attack that with them.
And here's my advice. Step one, gosh, we're plugging Ido Portal over and over again, but Ido has a series of things that he does, like with a stick, with a partner. The partner has to stay as close to the stick as possible while you're moving it around him. It looks a lot like a dance. It actually looks like Brazilian, like capoeira, right? Which is like dance, fighting. Like it's incredibly athletic. It is gymnastics and dance kind of combined. And the Brazilians, it's gorgeous, but it's also not a feminine thing. It's very like it's dancing and fighting kind of in combination. And so there's some middle ground there, which is the place to start with the athletes. But I'll tell you, when we do our dance, we haven't been dancing too much for warm up, but when we use it is on the road, we'll do activation sessions. Like, so in the morning when we have a game in the evening, we'll meet at 10 o'clock and we'll go into a conference room, a video room. We'll turn off all the lights. No one's allowed to record on their phone. It's in pitch black. Everyone gets to get their freak on and nobody can see. You're only concerned with yourself. We're watching a video of somebody teaching a dance like on YouTube, and we do it for 15 minutes. 3 or 4 dances, and everybody is laughing and sweaty by the end. And the girls requested, if I forget to put an activation session in, the girls are going to say, can we do an activation? And I've never had that when I was doing yoga. Like when I was doing like warm up or mini band activation sessions, nobody was showing up early and couldn't wait for it to start. But when we do the dance activation, like everyone's so stoked.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome. And the stick drills is actually one of our staples at our gym. Strict, and that is where I first started to discover like male athletes don't move well with each other. It's like I'm like, and then like they get it and they learn how to do it, but it's so cool. Like when you bring somebody new in, like teaching them the flow, like rather than like almost everything is brace or everything is fight, and it's like move with the stick rather than just like rapidly go away from it or like stab somebody and work with somebody. And like you said, I think the stick, and we do a lot of stuff with hanging as well, where they'll hang and they'll move each other on the stick with the stick on the bar. But yeah, it's one of our main keepers there.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I wish that our facilities had more places to hang. Like I'm a huge advocate of it over at Athletes, but it's not logistically. I need to get a bunch of really, really long ropes and hang some rings all around.
Yeah, and throw those babies up. Yeah, we're kind of lucky here in Minnesota too, because we got a couple climbing gyms around. So I'll take the athletes to climbing gyms, and every time, like almost every athlete gets addicted to it just because it's so gamified. It's like V0 to like V10. There's so many progressions there, but just getting the athletes on a wall, it's pretty cool to watch them. But you talk about, that's another thing that I'd like to talk to you about is like the positions. Like we talked about psychological, but it's also like the positions you can find yourself in like a dance, in some of these climbing things. Just like it's almost like climbing is a big one that I talk about, and that there's so many different ways you can do this. But climbing is one where it's like you can get 2 hours of hip stretches in quotations on a wall. And it's like I started to realize like how much better my hip mobility was. I'm like, I haven't done anything like hip stretch wise. And then I started to slow down some of the climbing videos, and I'm like, I'm in this like massive split position in the air for 2 hours, and you can't like, and that's where I really think, because you have coaches that are very analytical. You have coaches that are very like, I need work to get done. I can't waste my time. It can't be about fun. It can't be about the psychological, which I still think is silly. But even if you disregard the fun, the psychological side, and you're going strictly physical, it's like slow-mo this stuff, slow-mo, even spike ball, slow-mo the dance. Just like look at how much time you are getting in these positions and how many new positions you're finding and how much work you're actually getting done in a lot of these things. If you just slow-mo it and watch the position and see things that they haven't done before, and now you're exposing it to them, and they're psychologically engaged, so they're not complaining that they're holding an iso lunge for 2 minutes, but you just got them to do it. Like we play this squatted like gaga ball type game where they have to stay squatted and like block their shins with the ball. It's like there was one time where we got a guy squatting for 10 minutes. Like he was in this deep squatted position for 10 minutes playing this game, and he never once complained about squatting. I'm like, if I just told you to sit in a squat for 10 minutes, there's no way you would have done that.
Yeah, 100%. I've done dances before where I strung just a bungee cord at about hip level, and we're dancing, but every 20 seconds a little beep goes off and they all have to duck under the rope. It was just trying to get everybody to dance lower, but they're still having fun with the dance, but we're building a little bit of hip mobility into it. It's just thinking of constraints, like we were talking about before. What's the stuff that my head coach keeps yelling about, and how can I make something fun and stimulating that is also ticking the box for him? So all these things, I would like to learn how you play your crouch ball. That'd be good.
Yeah. So can you run me through what a warm up it looks like now? Because you talk about getting some of the handstand work in there, and kind of your setup to creating a warm up and creating a session.
Yeah, sure. To answer your first question, if we're going to go with the most generic template, and I try very hard not to have a template, it would be that I'm going to try to find right when they come in the gym. I have one goal, and that's just to get their body temperature up. And, to that, in pursuit of that, I try to have a 3 or 4 exercise kind of circuit, for lack of a better word. But yeah, so one of those things needs to be relatively fun, or stimulating, or a puzzle, or something that is remarkable or interesting. And the other ones are work. So, and hopefully work that is, well, obviously volleyball specific, but also making sure that in that circuit, they're getting into volleyball shapes. I'm not doing a great job if whatever we're doing never had them get down, into an athletic position. And so I have to then think about how can I constrain hula hooping so they actually get lower? Or if we're having a hula hoop relay races as the fun thing that we're doing, and maybe we just do that for 30 seconds, 1 minute, one relay race, then we go to work. And it's medicine ball tosses while everybody's in a full squat and we're, doing a medicine ball toss mayhem kind of thing. Maybe it's, maybe I've drug kettlebells in and we're doing Turkish get-ups because, I want to be teaching that in the weight room later, and we're just going to do it with light weight. And so, yeah, it's pretty much play, work is how it breaks down in the most general kind of way. And then after that, I let them go and they can go stretch. We either stretch as a group, or sometimes I let them do their own stretching, give them some autonomy over their stretching. I think it's important to juggle both of those things. And then afterward, then we come back and it gets into more neurological circuit. And that's where we can play again. I'm a huge believer that, in the pantheon of great neuro plyo exercises, there's probably nothing better than a game of tag, for the reactivity, for the stimulus, for the fun and the engagement. Yeah. And so we do tag variations, but there's no limit. We played dodgeball 2 days ago, but that's all the high intensity stuff that I can't get away with doing in that first thermal circuit because it's just too high intensity. And if somebody got hurt, that'd be on me. But at that point, they're all warm and stretched, and that's where we can play games. That's where maybe instead of tag or a game, maybe I'm doing something that is extremely volleyball specific. Maybe I'm taking the exact drill that I saw coach doing 2 days ago, pulling his hair out about, but I'm going to do it where they wear weight vests, or they have to do it with a blindfold over one eye, or I'm going to do that same drill where they're not allowed to use their dominant hand. They can only use their other hand, or maybe, they have to touch the ground in between doing the skill every time. I'm just going to put a small strength and conditioning twist on the sport specific drill that my head coach wants them to do more often. Well, now, as opposed to my warm up kind of psychologically taking time away from his training, now he sees my warm up is just part of his training. I'm doing the exact same stuff that he wants to emphasize. And so in this way, that's kind of the way that I look to design the warm-ups. Now, to answer your question, the way that looks, even on a little more macro level, is that at the beginning of the week, I have an Excel spreadsheet that has, if I say that I'm breaking warm-up down into kind of 2.5 blocks, that thermocircuit block, that neural play block at the end, and then that stretching time in the middle. I have those 3 sections in which I can get anything I want. And so I'm looking at that's 20, 30 different blocks in a week. And I can say, all right, I got to make sure our shoulders are strong. And I'm going to make sure I have shoulder work in this block, this block, this block, da, 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 da. We got to have more change of direction. We'll do that 2 days a week. I saw a coach getting mad that the girls are not being aggressive enough in their approaches to spikes. I'm going to do some assisted and resisted spikes on this day and this day. I'm going to, we need to get lower in defense is what coach said. I am going to build into the, neural circuit that we're doing. Wall sits is a terrible example, but but we're going to do like a fun variation of wall sits. And anyway, so then it all of a sudden it builds out. And of course it changes every day. So if I get a new toy, sometimes I'll just say, hey, we haven't hacky sacked in a while. I got to put that in that day. Or we haven't used the hula hoops in a while that day. Or we just moved to a gym and, I see a bunch of oily rags in the corner. I'm going to do an oily rag warm up that hopefully doesn't light anybody on fire. It's another terrible example, but that's where it kind of, it can change. It should be malleable. It should be adaptable to the needs of my team at that time, the needs of my head coach. If the medical staff or my physio is saying, hey, a couple of girls are complaining about a bad shoulder, well, then 3 days a week, or 3 of the days of the next week, our warm-up is going to look like a shoulder rehab session for the whole team. And it's just like, I want warm-ups to be a place that my whole staff team, that my head coach, the physical therapists and doctors, the mental coach, and the athletes, somebody afterward is like, hey, Rett, thanks for that one. That was good. Thanks for having my back on that. Thanks for doing the shoulder rehab that I told you about last week. Thanks for doing, the athletes are thanking me for the fun sessions, and the coach is thanking me for the volleyball specific work. I'm excited because, we got to do our isometric lunges that, I know that we had to tick the box on that week, so that's kind of the way it works. I think that was too long-winded an answer for you, but yeah, that's it.
So you do all that instead of an A skip?
Or we just default an A skip, or just jumping jacks. Yeah.
yeah. But I think that's the cool thing, is just how much thought goes into it. And because that is one of the things that you hear coaches like kind of shit on any of it, like whatever you want, a differential learning, constraint led, like play based approach is like, oh, it's just lazy. It's just like, you're not working. I'm like, have you talked to any coach that actually does this, and the amount of thought process that goes into what they're getting done and how much work they're getting done? Like it's such a silly answer to somebody that has this workout warm up A, warm up B that you run for all year long, and you're calling this other coach lazy for implementing it.
That rote warm up A, B, that's just comfort food for coaches. Like it is just so, I don't know. And fortunately, I think more and more people are taking it, or putting thought into it and being more deliberate about it. Because also, if you're a coach, like what coach isn't surfing Instagram and being like, oh my God, that David Weck guy, like he might be onto something, but where do I put, rope work into my, I don't have time. It's not like I can ask my head coach to give me an extra half an hour on Tuesday, Thursday to do rope work, or whatever, or swing clubs around. But if your warm up is this anything goes kind of place where your mandate is to make the athletes, challenge the athletes' coordination, well, then that the RMT works, ropes from the WEC guys and all that stuff fits in perfectly. And you get to be a coach that just got way more time with your athletes. And that, if you've been complaining about that to your coaching friends, problem solved.
With how messy some of this stuff can get, have you ever had any like warm-ups or things that just were not it?
Oh shit, yeah. Like we're talking about the small sticks. Like when I was sure my athletes would be much better. I watch Ito do it, and I'm like, he can do that. We'll do these little swirl things, and we'll pass them between each other. We'll flip them and catch them on our hands. It was just, we might as well just have been slamming the sticks down in between ourselves the entire time. It was just a complete failure, and stuff like that happens all the time. And the nice thing is it just made up, 20% of my warm-up that day, and it was full of us just kind of laughing and shaking our head, and me having to be like, all right, I actually do have to regress the crap out of these next time we do it. We're just going to practice balancing, standing completely still. But yeah, sometimes it does fail. And the differential learning stuff fails way more often, because it's even more complex. And that's stuff that, and I should mention this when you talked about what's a typical warm-up. I gave you the typical, like, me alone with the team warm up. Now, when I have my volleyball coaches to help me, the differential learning piece clicks in. So instead of me having to handle all the thermogenics, what a warm up would look like when we're at full strength, which we are with the German team, it's great that the German coaches will help construct this wonderfully elaborate, just like obstacle course or crazy, super, noisy, messy twist on volleyball that has the girls running around doing things that barely resemble volleyball in an attempt, like, as we know, differential learning does, to kind of promote as much adaptability by throwing a ton of variability at them, even stuff that doesn't look like volleyball. And we're just trying to build out that movement library. We're trying to make sure that when there are 3 volleyballs going instead of 1, and you have one arm taped behind your back and you have to be sitting on your butt, like, that something good will come of it. But at the end, everyone gets warm and everyone's laughing. And it's still, and my head coach will say, they're still touches. They're still quality touches of the volleyball. And, that's where the between the legs shot in pickleball or tennis happens. It's not like people get a ball machine and practice doing between the leg shots. I mean, maybe they do now in pickleball, but in tennis, that just comes from play, from hours and hours of play that is, and not just traditional tennis, but like, putting constraints and having to do crazy stuff. So anyway, the differential learning piece would then blend into a more abbreviated session with me, into some stretching. And then afterward, the neural piece would be the girls having to play a constraints-based game of volleyball. So it would be 2-on-2 and only hitting with your opposite hand. 2-on-2, you have to sit down in a chair after every single pass. 2-on-2, you have to touch the sideline between every pass. 2-on-2, you have to keep a balloon going up in the air on your side as well. And so that looks more like volleyball and can be strategically done to make us better. Like, this is where you're putting like blankets over the net so there's no visual stimulus from the other side. So you have to be more reactive to the ball coming right over the net. And so it goes from the differential learning, crazy, noisy, messy at the beginning for thermogenics, into a constraints-led approach that looks a little bit more like volleyball, that is more targeted towards something else. So that's a whole nother kind of warm-up that we can do. And we tend to blend those together every day in different ways.
That's freaking awesome.
And the girls love it.
Yeah, that funnel, that's amazing the way you described that too. And one of the cool things, like with the differential learning approach, and I've learned this through, I picked up pickleball within the last year and a half. It's just such a dumb hobby to pick up because now I'm addicted to it. I'm hanging out with like 60 to 70-year-olds every single day, hanging out with those people. And slow pitch.
I got 4 pickleball paddles. I brought it to Germany. Like, I brought 4 pickleball paddles and 10 balls because I'm teaching because I taught my assistant coaches to play, because they have a tennis court that no one uses at the Olympic Training Center. We play all the time.
Well, don't they play paddle there or something like that?
They play paddle. So every time I try to explain it to them, I have to listen to every German person being like, yes, we have that. It's called paddle.
I just had an intern come over from Italy. And he was telling me about paddle. It was like, he's like, yeah, it's the same as but paddle seems kind of way cooler. Like, it can go outside.
Yeah, but you have to build the fences, so it's logistically a little bit harder. Anyway,
yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
I cut you off.
Need to be very specific. But anyway, sorry. But yeah, picking up softball and pickleball is what the differential learning approach that I've picked up on is like. It's almost that exponential growth you give yourself access to. It's like giving your athletes access to those aha moments and just giving them moments of it, because there's so many times where like I've been messing around with a bat or with the paddle or whatever it is, doing different shots, goofing around, and I do something and I'm like, oh my God, like I've just been missing that. I've been missing that. And like when you're stuck in your rut of doing the same thing over and over, and especially like when you're competitive and you want to get better and you want to clean it up and you want to do this, you get stuck in these like ruts. And obviously you get stuck in like the neural pathways of doing something, and the like the trying to think of what Rob Gray calls them, where you fall into like the channel of the same movement pattern.
The attractors.
Yeah, the attractors. Yeah. When you expose yourself to differential learning approach, what I've picked up on is like, oh my God, I've been missing that the whole time. And it's like that one aha moment makes all of it worth it. You obviously still get all the other stuff we've been talking about, but like those aha moments are so like priceless because they can accelerate your skill acquisition of whatever you're trying to do by, for me, like, oh, it almost feels like years. It's like I was doing the same thing over and over and over again with nothing. And then I finally started to like goof around and expose myself to different ways. And it's just like clicks. I'm like, wow, I've been missing that.
That's the beauty of it. And that's where, devices like Rob Gray, and you're talking about softball, but he will have he has the contact ball that forces you to keep your elbow in and not flare when you throw, when pitchers throw overhead. And how without that, like, it's like they say, like the body is indifferent to coaching cues. The body could give a shit, like, and boy, Nick Winkleman, like the people that love coaching cues would kill me right now. But the point is that the body really, really loves to learn by doing, and kind of being constrained into like tricking the body into going through these new patterns. And it's like you were saying, I mean, it's if you have athletes if I have an athlete that isn't reaching high over their head to hit a volleyball, then I can either beg them to please reach high over their head, or even better, give them this wonderful external cue that I'm like, hey, I want you to touch the red light on a stoplight, not the yellow light, something like that. But or I could just stand them against a wall and have them hit volleyballs. And if they bend their elbow, they'd smash it into the wall. I mean, that's going to be better than my 20 cues. So it's there's absolutely a balance that you need, of course. But I think that a crucial piece of that puzzle is the constraints and the differential learning. But it takes work. You have to practice it. You have to listen to what other people are doing in that world. But once you can start seeing your movement problems through that lens, it opens up some different solutions
and how do you And how do you balance? Because this is something I kind of struggle with. And I don't struggle with it as much when I'm working with athletes. It makes sense. It's more so like when I'm working like practice designs for myself, because then it's like I feel the draw to, I need to go back to the game. I need to go back to the sport and be like pretty specific. Like, how do you balance for yourself and working with your team? And I know the sport coaches obviously have a say in this too, but like the general differential learning approach and the messy versus the constraints versus like actual volleyball where you're running like the specific, like how do you balance the spectrum from general to specific and working on that spectrum? Like how do you think about that?
Well, the nice thing is that if you throw out the way you've been doing warm up, if you just throw out all the foam rolling and stretching and running 2 laps around the track, not you, but I'm talking to people in general. Then you free yourself up to just make your warm up time the time that you're doing this. It doesn't come at the expense of anything that coach is normally doing volleyball wise. So like, it's not like I'm asking him to do less blocking practice or less 6-on-6 scrimmages. I'm just saying, hey, warm-up's going to look different now, and it's going to get him warm. It's going to get him prepped, but like, you don't have to sacrifice any of training time. It's just, I'm going to sometimes do warm-ups that you're going to be like, what the hell was that? And just know that it's based on science and not crazy. And it's not just, me being weird or lazy or trying to make a funny Instagram video. Like, this is just going to be the way it is. So that's my quick answer. But I think that that level, if you're a head coach listening right now, like, I think that level is up to you. But I would just, slay the sacred cows that you think your warm up needs to be, and then push it into that would be my suggestion.
I like that. Would you have any pushback, or I guess the coaches that'll say, I guess the thing that I'm thinking that would come up is like they're saying you're too sport specific, and like if they're getting mad at you for like overuse or doing too much volleyball, like anything there.
That's fair. No, I think we stay away from the like, for instance, none of the constraints games, none of the differential learning ever involves overhead spiking a volleyball. Not once in the history of us doing it, because that's our biggest overuse injury, right? Is just all the reps that get put on a shoulder in a practice. So we would never add to those reps during warm up. That's the main constraint that's in it's in almost all of the warm-ups, is that no overhead attacking. Or if you do, it has to be feet on the ground, and it has to be from behind a line. It's just not, it's sub-maximal. So that's something. So we kind of avoid it. I think you just have to be smart about it, because it would be a valid problem. But in my opinion, the approach of having so much variety in warm up, meaning that it's not like we're doing the volleyball constraints led stuff every day. Like sometimes it's that first example where it's macro dose strength and handstands and playing Frisbee. That having that degree of variability is one of the best things you can do to prevent overuse. I mean, if you're doing the same warm ups every time, like, geez, I mean, not only the psychological monotony of it, but also that you're still going through the same movements over and over again. Like for how long is a jumping jack or a karaoke going to be making you bulletproof before it just is wasted movement? There's that starts to have diminishing returns real quickly. Your body's good at it. Go, move on, do something else.
And on that's one of the things that I know, like people talk about, like, well, the warm-ups just to make them feel better, that's why we keep it the same. But like, I know, like, from my personal experience, it's like the warm-up works that way for like the first 2 weeks of an athlete running. And this is not me going at anybody. This is my own warm-ups that I was running, where I had warm-up A and warm-up B. For the first 2 to 3 weeks, it was like they would run the warm-ups, they would feel better after warm-ups they'd go through. You start hitting like 2 months of that warm-up where they're doing it again, that warm-up 1,000,000% makes them feel worse. Like, they used to complain about it all the time, about how much it like made them like feel worse. Like, and that's where I really started thinking, like, wow, that's weird. Like, it's supposed to warm, like, all the science tells me it's supposed to warm them up. It's ramp, like, we're getting them activated, we're getting them ready. And then like I got into this thing, I'm like, they're doing the same thing repetitively over and over. It's like, this is straight overuse. Like, I'm spending 30 minutes every single day doing the same thing, like just wearing them out. Well, they have like all of the volume that is on their sport. I'm just like wasted volume here. Switched over to the variability of warm-ups. It's like every time we do a new warm-up, the athletes are like, wow, like, not once have they complained about a warm-up, and the amount of times they say they feel so much better after we've trained a lot of rugby guys after if we're doing a new warm-up after they have a match, they're destroyed, beat up, they come in, they do this new warm-up and they're like, oh my God, like I feel so much better, feel so much better. I'm like, so the variability piece there, I think definitely has a say into like how much better an athlete can feel when you're not just running them into the ground doing the same thing over and over again.
And there is there's a crucial distinction also, but because the warm-ups that I do with the athletes before a competition, like when we're in competition, like we're warming up with the other team on the other side of the net, there is far less variability in that, because I do want them feeling confident. Like that's not the place for them to be falling down, looking like messy athletes. That if you just saw my warm-up before competition, and I do have like an A, B, and C, one that is no equipment, one that is Frisbees, one that is tennis balls. I have one that's balloons, so I have a new D1, but those are generally the same every time. I put reactivity into it, but that's, you're going to see the karaoke I was just making fun of, but it's a reactive karaoke where I make them change directions all the time. But, psychologically, you do need, when you're about to go play a top 3 team, they want to know what they're getting in. They want to know exactly what kind of energy expenditure it's going to take to get through warm up that day. They want to know exactly how many minutes it's going to take. They want to know exactly what they're going to have to do in front of, 8,000 people that are watching. And so I wear a different hat, and I take the competition warm-ups are a different ballgame.
Yeah. And that's super true too, as you think back to just like, I just remember back to, we would do these like pass rush in football, but it was like you hit a certain part of your warm up and you knew it was like go time. It's almost like the mind just adapted to it after so many reps of doing that same warm up on that game day. And it was the only time we did that warm up too, which is kind of cool. Like, now that I think about it, it was like such a psychological trigger to, you only do this warm up on this day. And when you hit that certain part of the warm up, your brain knows exactly where you're supposed to be at that time. And that's something that I've thought about too. And I don't run any game day warmups right now, which is I got out of the college sector, thank God. But before, when we were doing that, there was definitely something that we did, is trying to keep, and the sport coaches were all about that too. And the sport coaches, for everything they didn't know physiologically, like psychologically, they were masters of making sure like that warm up was on that day only, and we did these things on that day only. So like when that happened, you had that psychological trigger, and whether placebo or not, it worked for the athletes. Almost all the athletes that said the same thing about them.
I felt, when I was a track athlete, I felt the same way about lacing up my spikes. Like, there's normal days, there's training days, and then there's competition days, and it's on the competition days you put your spikes on. It like just puts a different mentality. And my coach in college was really good about, on certain interval workouts, he was like, it's a everybody in spikes workout. Like, I need everybody. And that was a trigger that you tighten those up, and it's a different kind of run that day.
Yeah. Okay. Now getting out of the warm up, I got you talking for the warm up for 55 minutes. One of the cool things that I love that you do, and even in the warm up, you talk about your strength training, microdosing strength training in your warm ups, but like your strength training is pretty awesome. And you're working with a lot of overhead athletes, and so many shoulder. I remember being at college. I didn't work with any of the volleyball, but it's like so many shoulder injuries. And the other one was knees that I saw a lot of. This is just walking in and out of the training room when I was working with the football guys, but volleyball's notorious for shoulder injuries, and I see you do a ton of overhead stuff. So like, what does your strength training, injury prevention, bulletproofing, whatever you want to call it, like, what does that look like for you with your volleyball athletes, and what's kind of your approach there?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's groundbreaking. I believe in kind of pushing and pulling in equal measure. So we, fundamentally, or just, I don't know, surprisingly enough to me, at least, my female athletes love bench pressing. Like, I would never have really thought that would be a go-to big rock in my volleyball program, but I have to do it just for the psychology of the weight room, because they get so excited when bench press is in the program. But it's very conjugate. So I believe in benching like normally for just a couple of weeks. And once the numbers start to plateau on bench press, then I want an excuse to have another reason to celebrate PRs. So I'll be like, okay, for the next week, we're going to bench press from dead bug, and you have to hold a medicine ball between your knees, or you have to balance the aqua bag on we just did this the other day. You have to balance an aqua bag on your dead bugged ankles while you bench. And we're going to see who can get the heaviest doing it that way. And that's another 2 weeks of celebrating, new PRs. And when that goes away, we're doing it with a hip bridge, a single leg, hip bridge, and see who can balance that while benching with a barbell. And then we switch it to dumbbells, and then we do floor bench, and then it's always bench pressing, but I'm going to vary it a ton so that it's always a new stimulus. Like especially once they plateau in one, we switch it so they get to have another reason. We have another reason to high five in the weight room. So it's kind of about that culture. I believe in a ton of straight arm strength. Like, I think that you can get a lot done from hanging, from handstands, from, holds, maybe a push-up hold with something crazy happening with your legs, some sort of distraction there. That's the word I'm looking for. Anyway, or, overhead with extending your arm overhead into a volleyball specific position and having to perturb that somehow, like either shaking a sandbag, which gives me some nice auditory feedback, gives them some auditory feedback. I could put a super band on either side of my hand, and I'm trying to get a ton of percussions that way, trying to shake that band as hard as I can, but all kind of straight arm. Things like old school body blade, I don't have any, but that would go into that bucket of things where you get perturbations and kind of a straight arm. So I'm all about trying to put the shoulder through stress in a bunch of different positions, with a kind of a locked, with a shoulder that's packed down and back. And then, I'm perturbing the system. That's basically it. And so every weight training session is very simply has to have one push and one pull in it. All the straight arm strength I push into warmups. So we don't do any of that because I don't need necessarily a lot of weight for that. And so in a weight training session, I save weight training, I save exercises for weight training that demand exercise. And then once we get towards the end of the season, then I can get to be the mad crazy scientist and start combining the pushes and pulls. Like, I'll rig up pulleys with kettlebells so that we can be pushing in one plane while we pull in another plane, and or rotate and push. And then it's just backing off of weight and instead making things more neurologically demanding, but still same thing. We're just always pushing and pulling it, but I just insist on it being like, I don't want to get to a point where my athletes are chasing bench press records or overhead press records. That's going to definitely hit a point of diminishing returns. Like, that's not going to bode well for my shoulders. Like, more and more weight is not the recipe for a super strong shoulder in a volleyball movement where your arm has to move incredibly fast. So instead, it's about finding as much variety as possible and throwing it all at them in different ways.
Yeah, and that's something that we definitely noticed with a bunch of American football guys. And this is more so shoulders are a really big one, and also like backs with squats. It's like as long as you change up like the squat variations, we've noticed like the back problem goes away because you're not driving yourself to go get 4 more pounds of compression on you every single week because you hit it. But you still, the benefit is you still get the new like the stimulus because it's something novel. You're working the muscle in a different way. You're working the squat pattern in a different way, but you're still be able to squat all year long or lunge all year long or bench all year long with a novel stimulus that is still and you're still PRing. And that's one of the cool things that we've noticed is like we'll squat, regular back, barbell back squat. We'll hit 12 different variations of squat. We'll come back to regular squats and they'll still PR in the regular squats. Like it's awesome. So you still are obviously getting stronger in that pattern, and it's not like you're just getting better, but the injury and just how they feel is so you're still getting stimulus just in a way that doesn't run them into the ground, like you said, because they're not chasing a singular number. They're not running themselves into the ground for something that really doesn't matter.
Exactly right. And when we get to squatting, it's like in the first half of the season. Well, in fact, I never like make it a big deal how much the girls are squatting. They of course know it's, but I'm never celebrating a big squat because I also don't want them being like, well, Rett really went nuts when Moni hit 120 on back squats last week. So even though I'm more comfortable at like 107, let me just see what 120 looks like and throw it on there and see if Rett notices, and that's the worst case scenario for me. So instead, when we are like, I'm a huge advocate when we talk about gamification. I'm an enormous advocate of competing in the weight room, but we almost always compete on speed or jumping heights. So we're always like, if we are going to be like, if anyone who's seen my page, like I have a jump mat in the barbell rack every single session, and we are finding a different way to jump, with a weight on our back, and compete. And maybe we're just competing against, maybe I've published your best ever jump with 40 kilos on your back, and you're going to try to beat your personal best. Or maybe I've paired you up with another player and you two are competing to see who has the best average. The team is competing to see who has the best average. Maybe I've grouped all the youngest athletes in one group and all the oldest athletes in one group, and we're all going to compete as bigger groups. But I want there to be a reason for there to be 4 girls around the rack screaming their heads off for every single girl that gets into the rack. And also, when I do that, I don't have to worry about the first 3 sets being a warm up that is just boring. And then we got to get to work for the last 2 or 3 sets, right? And those are the working sets. No, rep 1, set 1 is a fight when I gamify it well. And no rep is worthless. Like they have to be like competing the whole time. And I think so kind of on that subject, long story short, there's only one lift which is Bulgarians, which is kind of another thing of just like a part of the culture of our weight room. We want every girl to be able to get 60 kilos in the Bulgarian for a triple. That's the only that's the only exercise where we chase a weight as opposed to a speed or a vertical jump height.
That vertical jump idea where you're combining the partner's average, that is something I'm absolutely stealing. That is awesome.
Oh man, if I had to throw away all of my equipment and I could only keep one piece, it might have to be my jump mat. Like honestly, it's like having an assistant coach. Like I never have to ask the athletes to work hard while I have a jump mat. Like I never have to ask them to please give me more effort. And as we know, like plyometrics, if you're not doing them at 100%, then the effectiveness of them is just like chopped off at the knees. And so, only by competing, not by imploring them to please work harder, only by competing and measuring everything or measuring the stuff that I care about, can I get that. And by, using every psychological trick in the book. You don't want to let your partner down.
Oh, there we go. You back?
Yeah, I'm good.
Sorry, I lost you a little bit there. It froze, but you don't want to let your partner down. And that's something that, like, if you said 2 pieces of equipment, like, if you, I guess 3, I'm going to go with 3. If I had a spike ball net, jump mat, and a laser timer, you can get athletes just so addicted to training. I mean, it's just a video game. Like you're just using the aspects of a video game and applying it to training. And like the amount of jump, like if I let athletes just go on a jump mat, I guarantee I could get 100 jumps in a day from some of these athletes. Cause it's like drive. And especially you put a partner there or add a different variation to where there's a little bit more variability. Sometimes like standing verts get a little bit dead because it's like they hit a peak and they can't go up, but you add like a little bit of variation, a 180 turn or something like that. It's so funny how addicted these athletes get, just like trying to grab on.
Oh yeah, and if I'm burying it enough, I'm also not constantly rewarding the three girls that have a huge vertical jump, because that's also not good for my weight room culture. So I have to, like, some days, like one day, like 2 days ago in the weight room, our jumps were just about who could jump high, but only if you can hit that mat in less than 200 milliseconds. So that broke open a whole new group of girls that were at the top of the leaderboard. You know, that created a whole new group of girls that got to scream and high five for being the best, when our big jumpers, it turns out they're big slow jumpers, right? They need a bigger time. And some of our smaller girls were crushing them in jump height when you had to also jump under 200 milliseconds. So I'm constantly also thinking about how can I make sure that I'm rewarding the effort of everybody in my weight room, not just constantly, making my weight room a place where the top strong, fit 4 girls always feel great. Everybody else doesn't.
Yeah, I always talk about my whole goal is trying to make the winners lose and the losers win in my gym, because it's like the winners have never been exposed to losing and the losers have never been exposed to winning, and you can mix match and like the winners can learn so much from losing and the losers can learn so much from winning, and like trying to get that combined. But obviously vertical jump is a huge thing in volleyball. Anything else special you're doing for vertical jump? Anything else you're doing to really like emphasize that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how special it is. I am a dyed-in-the-wool K-box, like eccentric overload fan, that I think a steady diet of that, especially in the early season, not only squatting, single leg squatting, but also calf raises. We do a ton of like kind of high repetition, but just gnarly grinding eccentric overload calf raises that like I said, this is all not only in the injury resistant part, but I really think that it goes toward making us the fast jumpers that we need to be. That at this level of volleyball, jumping high is no longer enough. You have to be able to jump extremely quickly. Your rate of force development needs to be through the roof to be a great player at this level. And so the K-box forcing, or any kind of eccentric overload system, forcing your muscles to couple more quickly. So that's something that is part of the weight room at least once or twice a week, especially in the early season. Outside of that, it's paying attention to the little things. It's like, for my middle hitters, if you know anything about volleyball, jump off of one leg like a basketball player. Well, that's a different jumping mechanic than a traditional spike jump, that kind of coupled 2-footed jump. Because your hip hike is a huge part of it. It's the reason that little, skinny, 6'4", 130-pound high jumper in your high school could out dunk, half of the football team, even though he can only squat, 135. Like, it's because he's so good at the hip hike. And so you have to design a weight room training program with whatever it is, step ups or jumps where you have to, talk about constraints. Maybe you have a thing of tape on the wall and you have to do an explosive, let's say like a kickstand start into a step up where your hips end up hiked with the barbell on your back. Like, you need to be addressing each kind of jumper that you have, and also trying to drill down on what is the puzzle of each girl. Like, what is the fact that Annie over here sucks at the K-box? Is more K-box time going to unlock her vertical jump potential? Is the fact that this girl squats the gym, but, is lousy at plyometrics? Like, is that now I have to, all right, is that her weakness? All right, let's try giving you more of that. And so it's also, I think, unlocking it. But I'll try to sum up to be really granular. Like, we squat at least, if we're doing 3 weight training sessions, we'll squat one of them with accommodating resistance. So we always band squats. Like, I don't think jumpers need to squat without bands on, honestly, unless we're doing our other favorite kind of squat, which is non-counter movement squats. So where we set the pins up in the racks and the girls don't get to rely on the down portion. They just start from the rack and have to just go up. So we're working on our abilities to really ramp up and take slack out of the system and be able to get, some propulsiveness without needing to do the down counter movement. So we have a non-counter movement squat day and an accommodating resistance, that's bands and chains, squat day. And then Those are both offset with a barbell squat jumps, like I said, with the jump mat. Like, and those will be lighter. Those get up to 40 or 50 kilos, but never any heavier than that. A lot of variety in that, but we're always jumping with a barbell on our back for the same reason I love the idea of those landings making us injury resistant, but also, I don't think you can train jumpers if at the top of your squat, you're always decelerating to a stop so your feet stay on the ground. Like, I think that does a disservice to jumpers. Like, jumpers need to jump. And so, the weights have to get real heavy before I'm telling the girls not to try to jump. So even when we're squatting, the girls are coming up on their toes, trying to get lift off, even when they're squatting 120 kilos. We're trying to make that bar, we call it making the bar sing. I want to hear the weights rattle at the top, like from coming down from the lift. And then, the last day is our Bulgarian day. And like I said, everybody's got to get super strong in that. That's our big glute exercise. We'll also do deadlifts. So deadlifts is a thing, but I don't chase heavy deadlifts at all. I made that mistake once. It's like the only weight room injury I've ever had was chasing after deadlifts heavy. And now I will never get over like 80% of their 1RMs. We'll just do a little bit more volume, and that seems to keep everybody good. They get a lot of plyometrics in their normal training, so I don't have to do too much of that outside of the weighted barbell jumps that we're doing. And like I said, tons of calf work as well is the last probably bit of the puzzle. I don't do a ton of posterior chain other than the Bulgarians. We do RDLs, like we'll do some RDLs, also submaximal. We don't get crazy into it. We don't do a ton of hip hinging just because that's not as volleyball specific. Because if you hip hinged a lot at the net, you would face plant into the net. So it's a little bit of a unique thing. Volleyball is a little bit unique, and we have to cater to the jumpers that have a net in front of them as opposed to basketball or something else.
I love it. You got me hyped to go jump right now.
That's then mission accomplished. Talk to you later.
Yeah. Anything with knees, knee health, any jumper knees with volleyball?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I'm planning out the week of warmups, that's probably one of the first blocks I put in is how much, and I've taken a lot from the knees over toes group. We do a bunch of resisted backpedaling, like partner resisted backpedaling. In warmups, we do a bunch of sissy squats in warmups. We hit a lot of like Poliquin step ups in warmups. So in a given week, we're probably doing, probably every day, there's something that is specifically for knee health, because that's of course crucial to us. Outside of, like I'm lucky to have things like the aqua bags. So if girls are holding the aqua bags on their back, we can do some bounding, like a bound stick and stabilize, right? With the water sloshing around. We can do some stepping off of a box or a bench that we have in the gym and stepping off at different angles and trying to stabilize that aqua bag on their back. That's another part of our regimen for kind of bulletproofing our knees, if you will. But we do the Spanish squats. We do, I like a lot of variety in it. But I just make sure that we're ticking the box and doing some of it every single day.
Hell yeah. Well, coach,
to keep my job. Like I have to be able to justify knee health. If anybody, I don't know if you have this, Austin, but I have this little fear. Like I have this thought in the back of my head that like somebody who's trying to take my job is just looking at my Instagram feed being like, oh, you idiot. Oh my God, I'm going to apply for your job and I'm going to show your coach, this is the dumbest exercise, or this is the stupid, or he doesn't do enough of this. And so I'm like, all right, I'm gonna screw that guy. Let me just make sure I've crossed my T's, dotted my I's. I got enough in there for the people that think I need stronger knees. I got some knee exercises that aren't knee over toes for the people that don't like knee over toe. Like that's the thing. Like I said before, when you free up your warm up to be anything that gets them warm, you get to do all of the stuff that you see on Instagram that makes sense to you. You get to throw it against the wall and see what sticks. You get to throw it against the wall and see what your athletes tell you helps them. And you get to experiment more when you have 50 blocks of warm-up training a week, or 20 blocks of warm-up training a week to fill up.
And when your athletes like you, and their athletes like their bodies and how they feel, and you win games, it's really hard for that person to come in and be like, well, your take is stupid. It's like, well, we're winning. Our athletes feel better. Like it's like that. That's the biggest thing. It's like, what? And that's like a lot of the things is like, I got out of the metric game because I was so far in it. and I got out of the metric game for a little bit, and I'm like, what? Like, I'm just gonna start tracking these metrics, and now it's like I have data points on data points of metrics. It's like you can say it's goofy all you want, but everything is like going up. Like you can't say anything about like the goofy like play based stuff that we're doing. You can't take the job when you have the metrics to back it up.
That's right. And that's why I have to sometimes I have to remind myself that it's important that I show some training in the weight room that shows the girls actually being strong and doing stuff that might be more traditional, because I would worry that any future employer I would ever have would just look at my page and be like, it's just the dancing stuff. What the hell is this guy doing? And so, yeah, but you remind me of one of my favorite quotes that Dan Baker said when he was talking about how he likes to test. He's like, I mean, you don't have to test, but all right, try to keep your job some other fucking way. This is the way I do it.
It's so true. But yeah, this is awesome, Coach. Any other rabbit holes you're currently in that you want to talk about before we head off?
Oh no, I love this. Like, yeah, it's fun to talk to a like-minded person, and it's fun to share secrets and talk about this stuff.
Yeah, this was amazing. Thank you for being on, Coach.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Yoakum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.